So I'm happy to tell you a little bit about what I'm doing beside the stereo side and the Brooklyn Stereoscopic community. This is restoring stereoscopic antiques. I'd like to start with an introduction about, let's say, something like the philosophy behind that, because if you look at those objects, asking why to restore at all is certainly up for debate, as we all, well, if we love stereoscopic antiques, we also love the history of them. And of course, this history is shown by the traces of use. And it's hard to tell whether these are worth to keep or to remove by restoring. But I think there are still a few good reasons for restoring. Firstly, the functionality. If a stereoscope was designed for using and you cannot use it anymore, for me, it's clearly that I should try to make it functional again. Secondly, if we have an object that is over 100 years old, we might not be able to see how it actually looked like when it was still in use, because we see the traces of standing for decades in an attic or being exposed to humidity, etc. And the third reason is that, in my opinion, it's also about bringing something back to the market of antiques, because all of those stereoscopes are only available in limited quantity. And if a stereoscope is actually complete but damaged and dirty, it might disappear from the market forever. So for me, it's also the possibility to bring it back in some case. Well, of course, for now, I'm bring it only back to my own collection. I'm not selling it if I have restored it in general. I always ask myself, what would this stereoscope or this camera would look like today if it would have never left, let's say, the living room of its original owners, and if they had cared for it for all these years. That's for a short introduction. I always start with a complete disassembly, and I think this is also really, really important. At first, there are different materials like metal or wood, and those materials require in general different techniques to clean them. And if you have metal nearby to wood, you would damage either one or the other. If you, for example, clean the wood with a fluid, this is not good for the metal. And if you clean the metal with a steel wool, this would damage the surface of the wood. So it's much more easy if you disassemble it in its single parts. Also, sometimes it is impossible to reach every part for cleaning, and therefore we have to disassemble as well. And the third reason is, if you do a thoroughly cleaning, you will have to put pressure on the stereoscope. And if you disassemble it before, you will make sure that you don't put any pressure on the parts where you don't want to have it. So otherwise it could be broken in the end. And finally, it's for me, it's also trying to reverse the processes of decay. And if if I would not disassemble the object, I would accelerate the traces of wear while cleaning it. So I hope this was good understandable, because I'm getting a little confused because I don't see any one of you anymore. But because no one is telling me to stop or have a question, I suppose it all went well. So I'm going over to present you my tools that I use in general. Well, most of all, I really use only a standard tool set. You need, first of all, screwdrivers, you have flat nose pliers and side cutters. But the most important tool is a screwdriver. And typically you have only slotted screws, no Phillips head or something like that. And for the smaller screws, you can use those that I've shown here, those small watchmakers tool sets. But there is one problem if you have larger screws, because the slots in antique screws are much narrower than on modern screws. So if you use a modern screwdriver, you cannot get it into the slot. And if you use one of those small screwdrivers, you have not enough force to turn the screw. So what I did is I grinned a blade of a modern large screwdriver. And as you can see in the picture here, the blade, after I grinned it, it's as thin as the one from the small screwdriver. It's, let's say, it's almost as thin as a butter knife. There are also some different problems, but I will skip them for now, because you can read much more details in the article that I will publish right after my presentation. So the procedure. As you can see, I try to disassemble as much as I can, except the mechanical work of the, let's say, a tabletop stereoscope. You actually don't need to disassemble it entirely in most cases, because it was covered by the case of the stereoscope and is not that dirty in general. You can disassemble by unscrewing or by loosen the nails with the small side cutter. Don't cut it off, but just try to lose it a little. And yes, this example shows a Jules Richard taxiphode. And as you see, there are more wooden parts that you actually can disassemble than you might think if you look at the taxiphode when it's not disassembled yet. This is because while you disassemble, you will realize that some parts are not stable anymore. Another thing is that you sometimes even might have to break parts off, really, literally. As you see on the right, there is this ground glass on the right of the picture, and a little bit more left, there is a small piece of wood. This was actually glued in that frame on the left to keep that glass in position. So there are no screws, no nails, it's just glued. But luckily, if the glue is 100 years old, it will break there where you want it to break. But of course, you have to be very careful. So what you see here is a cleaning fluid that I use for 2 years now, and what I have mixed myself, because there was a product from the German manufacturer with the name Clue. It was called Clue Polish, and it was a water-based suspension that contained a little bit of soap and pumice powder as an abrasive. So you sanded the lacquer, the shellac, if you rubbed over it. Unfortunately, Clue stopped producing and selling this, so I had no idea how to go on when my last bottle of this fluid was empty. But 2 years ago, I finally came across an alternative that I could easily mix. There are many different polishing pastes for car paint, and those contained those abrasives as well, those pumice powder or anything similar. And I've looked for a water-based product that did not contain any wax or silicone. So, well, everything I need to do was putting more water to it, so that that it became more fluid, let's say like milk, probably. And then it's not really difficult to apply it. You see here a cabinet of a Smith Beck & Beck stereoscope from the 19th century, and you can clearly see where the wood is becoming brighter again. This is where I rubbed this fluid with an old sock. I rubbed it gently, and it will remove all kind of dirt. You can see it a little bit better in this picture. There you can see that the shellac becomes glossy again. You can see the reflection of my smartphone. I think you can easily see the difference between the dirty parts and the clean wood. Probably there will be better products, but I didn't find anything in Germany or in Europe, I'd say. I really tried to find something, but I did not succeed. So, a different thing is if you have no lacquered wood, but waxed. You see a cabinet, again, for a Texifot here. And I generally try to change the original surface as little as possible. But an exception is the waxed wood, as there are water stains underneath the wax layer, and you cannot reach them if you do not remove the wax entirely. To do so, I rub the wood thoroughly with a bale of the finest steel wool. I think it's grade 0000, and I soak it regularly in cleaning gasoline. So in Germany, it's called Waschbenzin, and I hope the translation is right, cleaning gasoline, but I asked some native speakers and they told me it should be this. Yes, Ian, thank you. He wrote in the chat that also mineral spirit would be a proper translation. So the result always looks terrifying, like this. So you mustn't be afraid, because if you go on and, for example, add a little bit linseed oil varnish, you immediately see that the original color of the wood comes back. So there are a few different options, but I'll skip that. If you want to know more what you can do when you work with waxed wood, you can ask afterwards or find some more details in the article. Here you see another example where you see that the top of the stereoscope, Hemday from France this time, is, sorry, someone wrote something in the chat. Do I have to look? Well, I skipped that. Yeah, you see here that the top is damaged by water, and this is how it looks afterwards. So if you have a waxed surface, you are lucky. It's much better to restore and to bring back to a beautiful color than if you have lacquered, like shellac or something like that. Let's turn to metal. For metal, in general, I use again those grade 0000 steel wool, and I just rub gently over the metal pieces. And what you see here is that it's really, really dirty here, and this is what it looked like afterwards. If the nickel-plated brass here in this example, if the nickel is already gone, you cannot bring it back. But at least you can. I think it just looks clean now. And if I have my eyes real close to that parts, I feel better if they are clean in that case. So there is nothing more to say except if you have temperate, like this blue metal you have sometimes, you have to be very, very careful because you will rub the color off immediately. So I would not recommend to use steel wool on those bluish metal parts. The mechanical work is quite easy to clean. I'll show you here. Oh, this is again the same, a little bit larger. So if you have the mechanical work here, I only use a little bit penetrating oil like WD-40 to spray on the toothbrush here, and this is what it looks afterwards. In general, it's just a little bit of dust in there. So that's it for cleaning, and I now have a few more information about repairing and replacing stuff, but it's really difficult in here to have like a full set of advice, because you have always to decide based on the individual object to have. There you see a taxi photo again that has almost fallen into pieces. And as you see, you can basically glue it with white glue. And I know this is not the original bone glue, but I think it's okay to use this. But if you use those clamps here, don't forget to put a little bit wood or something like that below the clamps, that you don't damage the wood. Here is something else that I like to show you. This was a stereoscope that I got from France. And as you see, there was woodworm all over it and all over the base. And this is something that I somehow really enjoyed. I had holidays and I had to fill like 700 holes of woodworm. And I can tell you, you need different colors of wax putty, and you have to do each hole separately. But if you keep in mind how it looked here before on these two pictures, this is what it looked afterwards, and it was completely worth all the work. Because even I myself have to take a really close look to find those woodworm holes. Of course, in advance, I put some parts in the oven to kill the remaining woodworms inside. But I hope it all went well. And well, actually, I will see in the next spring if there will be any new holes. But I hope there won't be any. So I think I have only a few pictures now on the presentation. Yeah, this is the entire stereoscope afterwards. What I did was the cleaning of the wax with cleaning gasoline, as I told you before. I added some linseed oil varnish to bring back the color. I disassembled everything. I used steel. No, I used my self-made fluid for the backlights, the oculars, and a little bit of steel wool for the manufacturer's label, and of course, much colored wax for the woodworm holes. Coming back to my question, what would a piece look like if it was still in the living room of the original owners and not forgotten in an attic or a basement? This is another thing that I'd like to show you. Actually, as I got this camera from New York, I was immediately in love already, but I am now even more because now I would say it looks probably almost a little bit like new, but I really tried to don't give the impression to make it look new. But if you look in the first picture, you will even hardly notice that there are brass parts in the corners, but now they are really golden again. And I'd like to show you one more. This was the large cabinet. I showed a few photos in the show and tell in a previous meeting here. And as you see, this is what it looked like as I put it into my car. You see a little bit pale parts and dots everywhere. Then the terrifying result when I removed all the wax, but now it looks like that. So I'm not sure if this was the last. Yes, it was. So for me, it's always like getting more personal, a personal approach to the object I'm working on. And I hope maybe this is also a way to become part of the history of this object myself. And I hope after me, this will not disappear from the market, but will remain for the next few centuries. So that's all I'd like to tell you. And as I said before, there are much more details in the article, but I think it's better to read them slowly and decide if you can use this or that advice. But also feel free, if you have maybe a handheld viewer that is a little bit dirty, please feel free to get in touch with me, and I will give my best to help you if you want to try restoring, or let's say cleaning. So, thank you.
Thank you, Pascal. That was amazing. As you know, you can see in the comments, everyone is just really impressed. So I'm going to start with a question. So Pascal is going to be helping me do this restoration. I bought this Becker stereoscope, really old one, tried to find one for a cheap price so I could mess up if I and not feel too badly about it. But one of the things that you didn't mention when you talked about disassembling, and I love the explanations you gave and the reasons for it. One of my reasons personally is I feel like I will learn more about how they work by actually taking them apart. So my question though, have you ever messed up on something that you could not fix? Because that is my biggest fear. Have you ever just broken a piece of glass, can't fix it, or just something like that?
Honestly, unfortunately, yes, I did. But well, in the beginning, I was also more careful. If I would restore, let's say, my first stereoscope that I've restored, if I would do it again today, I would do more. But it's also, I would always say, be careful. But yeah, there is another thing. Meanwhile, when I realized that I will be restoring frequently, I try to look for spare parts as well. And there are, for example, those little backlight knobs for turning the oculars or adjusting the focus, and they are all the same across different stereoscopes. So I think there has been a large manufacturer, and I have a few of those, and I replace them. So I really replace parts, but only with the original parts from that time. But yes, to come back to your question, I messed something up. I didn't show it today, but well, if you have a really expensive and unique piece, just be careful. And I think it's possible to do almost nothing and or do more or more or more. And you can stop wherever you think it's not safe anymore.
Great,
I've
thank you.
got a question for you, Pascal. So I tend to, when I work on projects like this that involve taking something apart, I just sort of memorize where the pieces go by studying how they interact and whatnot, which my dad, who's an engineer, thinks is an abominable practice. He always diagrams it on graph paper and whatnot. I'm just curious, do you document where every piece goes lest you forget, or do you just mentally kind of remember?
Well, I'm not disassembling everything at once. I take the eyepieces off, but I leave them together until I have to clean them. And I don't disassemble the mechanism of the inside. But I can tell you a story. Before I got into stereoscopy and stereoscopes, I was fascinated by old typewriters. And I tried to disassemble and failed. Well, I did not fail disassembling, but I failed reassembling. So this is, I think you are right. But basically, there are not so many parts to disassemble that are so small. So I have a magnetic, I don't know the word, a magnetic
Tray?
yes, where I put the screws in general, and I put it together with the parts in small groups, but there are not so much possibilities to put them back together in a wrong position. So I do not make a detailed list. David, you wrote about I disassembled the inside of the taxi foot, partly already, because there was something that that prevented it from turning somewhere. It is possible, but I know especially the mechanism of the taxi foot very well, and I agree. As I said, in most cases, it's not necessary to disassemble the mechanism itself. I cannot hear you. You are muted again, probably.
Is it working now, finally?
Yes.
I signed off and on again. I thought that might help. Oh, yeah, no. Obviously, if it's not working, you have no real choice but to at least go as far as you think you need to go to get it working.
Honestly, I did not encounter a stereoscope that was not working anymore because of normal use. There are damages of wrong use or of dirt or something like that, but I never found a stereoscope that was just broken by normal use. I think those are really made for eternity, maybe.
Yeah. Well, we are the first taxi photo we ever got at a show, camera show. The seller didn't think it was working, and it was only because we had a friend that knew taxi photos who said, "Buy it, you'll get it working." And all the real problem was somehow broken glass. You know, one of the slides must have broken in it, and broken glass pieces got stuck in there. But pretty much vacuuming it out with a vacuum cleaner and getting all the glass bits out that we could, and then it worked just fine. Also, at that time, I didn't even understand how you used a taxi photo, and luckily the friend showed me all the steps. So it also helps to know the mechanics.
David, is that the taxi photo behind you?
No, that's not. Well, actually, no, that's a, I don't know the brand name. That's a British, it's a sequential, whatever, a tabletop viewer for roughly glass plates that are the size of a classic stereo card. And it's British, and it rotates, and they're on a thing, but it's not a taxi photo. We do have, I've corresponded with Pascal about this. We have 4 taxi photos, 3 45 by 107. Each one is a different model, and 1 6 by 13. And that's enough taxi photos.
David,
you have room for no more.
David, do you happen to have the mechanic model?
Yeah, we have a model mechanique, a model optique, the standard model, and the 6 by 13.
Are you looking to part with the mechanic?
No, that's the most valuable one. For those that don't know it, the taxi photo, usually the image just comes up from the tray into viewing position. So the size is the focal length, the focus distance from the lens to where it comes up. But the model optique has these giant lenses that can be swung down to magnify it further. And then the model optique is a whole different mechanism where it lifts it up and then brings it closer to the lens for viewing. And you turn the crank, and the crank moves continuously instead of a lever going up and down. It's really pretty cool. Someday, but not yet.
I want one very much.
Keep looking.
So thank you so much, Pascal, for I look forward to the article, as I'm sure many of us do.